2 bicycles chained to a tree, 2 towels left on the lake. No girls. They were supposed to be at college, but by nightfall, they were gone. That's how a sleepy town's summer turned into silence. Detective Wiley stared at decades-old notes, a photograph, and then finally a missing piece, the diary, sensing and noticed something everyone had missed. And when she pieced together the last movements of Jessica and Kate, the lake whispered secrets that had been hidden for 40 years, and what happened next shocked the whole town. This is the horrible story of the Briggs sisters' forbidden practices, and how they became their father's lovers. The summer of 1976 felt heavy in the quiet town of Albany, New York, yet the country was still adjusting to the cultural whirlwind left in the wake of the 1960s. FM radios carried the constant hum of Mick Jagger's The Rolling Stones, while bedroom walls across town were plastered with Star Wars posters, teenagers dreaming of adventures far beyond their small streets. By July 21st, the heat had climbed past 93 degrees, making the asphalt shimmer under the sun and slowing even the busiest of days. Inside a modest 2-story home on Guava Street, Jessica Briggs, 19, methodically folded her clothes into a suitcase, bell-bottom jeans, flowing blouses, and her neatly pressed shirts. Her younger sister, Kate Briggs, 17, lounged nearby on the bed, flipping through a magazine without much care for the heat or the packing. The room captured the essence of a 70-second teen's world. Posters of Mark Hamill from Star Wars shared wall space with Olivia Newton-John's radiant smile from Grease. In one corner, a turntable held a stack of vinyl albums, the Eagles, David Bowie, and Elton John. Jessica, known as Jessie to family and friends, had just finished her final month at Albany High School. In a few weeks, she would leave for New York State, the first in her family to attend college. She hoped to study education and eventually return to Albany to teach at her old elementary school. With long auburn hair that tumbled naturally around her shoulders, hazel eyes that sparkled with curiosity, and a smattering of freckles across her nose, Jessie was the pride of the Briggs household. Intelligent, graceful, and endlessly capable. That day, ordinary as it seemed, carried a quiet weight that no one could yet recognize, and as the summer sun bore down on Guava Street, life went on, each small detail weaving the memory of a moment that would linger far longer than anyone realized. "I don't want you to go," Kate said, twisting a strand of her honey-blonde hair around her finger. From the small radio on the dresser, Rod Stewart's "You're in My Heart" drifted softly through the room. "Who's going to look out for me when Dad drinks?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Mom will," Jessie replied, though her words sounded hollow even to herself. She folded a denim skirt with care and placed it neatly into her suitcase. "And I'll be back by Thanksgiving, just 3 months." What no one could have predicted was that Jessica Briggs would never make it to college. That night, both Briggs sisters would vanish, leaving nothing behind but unanswered questions and a town stunned into disbelief. Later that evening, Mary Briggs returned from her shift at the Woolworth department store to find the house eerily quiet. Her husband, Ryan, was at his weekly bowling league. Yet the girls were supposed to be home hours ago. The television flickered with the Love Boat, and dishes from lunch still sat in the sink, untouched. Mary called out for her daughters, but the only responses were the ticking of the cuckoo clock in the hallway and the faint sounds of Charlie's Angels from a neighbor's television. By 10 p.m., when Ryan Briggs stumbled through the front door, reeking of beer and cigarettes, Mary had already contacted every friend the girls had. No one had seen Jessica or Kate since mid-afternoon, when they were last spotted walking toward Lake Tivoli, a local swimming spot popular among teenagers. Despite his drunken state, Ryan's concern jolted him awake. He grabbed the keys to his Ford LTD and drove toward the lake, the yellow headlights cutting through the warm July night as crickets hummed in the oppressive heat. No one knew what had happened at Lake Tivoli that evening, or if the sisters would ever be seen again. And as the night stretched on, the quiet of Albany seemed heavier, carrying secrets that were only just beginning to surface. Subscribe now. Every second you wait could be someone else's last chance, and your silence makes you complicit. If not, tell us in the comments why you chose ignorance. At the lake, Ryan Briggs found only the girls' bicycles chained to a nearby tree. Their towels were laid out along the shore, but there was no sign of Jessica or Kate. A half-eaten pack of Twinkies and 2 bottles of Tab soda rested on one of the towels, abandoned mid-snack. Ryan shouted their names, his voice carrying across the still, dark water, but no reply came. By midnight, Chief Daniel Harper of the Albany Police Department had organized a search party. Officers swept the shoreline with flashlights, while volunteers trudged through the surrounding woods. The department's single patrol boat cut across the lake, spotlights dancing over the black water. By dawn, the search had produced nothing but fatigue and growing unease. That morning, the disappearance of the Briggs sisters became the lead story on WBRO radio. As Mick Jagger's Brown Sugar faded from the airwaves, the news announcer's somber voice relayed the scant information available about the missing girls. By afternoon, their school photos were taped to every shop window along Main Street. The local paper, the Albany Gazette, ran the headline, "Local Teens Disappear from Lake Tivoli." In 1978, there were no Amber Alerts, no cell phones to ping, no social media to instantly spread news. The search relied on knocking on doors, making calls on rotary phones, and printing flyers on mimeograph machines, leaving volunteers' fingers stained purple with ink. Chief Harper set up a command center in the high school gymnasium. Folding tables were arranged with push-button telephones where volunteers logged calls and tips. A large map of Albany and the surrounding county hung on the bulletin board, pins marking the areas already searched. Hours passed, yet there was still no sign of Jessica or Kate, and the lake seemed to guard its secrets jealously. As the day wore on, Albany braced for the long, uncertain search ahead, unaware that the answers they sought might never be easily found. The scent of fresh coffee and cigarette smoke filled the air as residents of Albany gathered to help search for the missing Whitaker sisters. In the first days of the investigation, a few leads surfaced. A gas station attendant reported seeing a dark-colored van with out-of-state plates near Lake Tivoli around the time Caroline and Anna vanished. 3 local teens claimed to have heard screams from the north shore of the lake, though they admitted they had been drinking Coors beer taken from one of their fathers. Meanwhile, the sisters' friend, Jane Turner, told police that Jessica had mentioned a secret boyfriend, older and not from the area. Chief Dan Harper and his small team of officers worked tirelessly, checking license plates through the state police, interviewing everyone present at the lake that afternoon, and dragging the lake bottom for any sign of the girls. They gathered what physical evidence they could: cigarette butts near the towels, tire tracks along the dirt path leading to the lake, and fingerprints on the abandoned soda bottles. But without advanced forensic technology, the clues led nowhere. Ryan and Mary Briggs appeared on the local news, Mary clutching a tissue, her voice trembling, and Ryan looking drawn and pale. "Please," Mary pleaded, tears in her eyes. "If anyone knows anything about our daughters, please come forward. We just want them home." As days turned into weeks, the investigation began to stall. The FBI sent an agent to assist, but without concrete evidence of an abduction crossing state lines, their involvement was limited. Each lead seemed to fade before it could give answers, leaving the Briggs family in growing despair. And as the town held its breath, the search stretched on, the lake and surrounding woods keeping their secrets just out of reach. People ignore warnings all the time. Then tragedy happens. Don't be like one of them. Check the pinned comment. Get the survival guide now and take the first step toward prevention. Psychics traveled from as far as Los Angeles to Albany, offering their services to the desperate Briggs family. One insisted the sisters were being held in a cabin in the nearby mountains. Another claimed they had run off to Vegas to join a commune. None of these leads proved true. By Labor Day, when Jessica should have been moving into her dorm at Albany University, the daily searches had largely ended. The command center in the high school gymnasium was dismantled, and the space returned to its usual purpose as students prepared for the new school year. The Briggs case remained technically open, but active investigation slowed to occasional follow-ups and review of old evidence. What no one knew then was that the truth was far darker than anyone imagined, and answers would remain hidden for nearly 4 decades. As the late 1970s gave way to the 1980s, the Briggs case grew colder. Missing posters featuring Jessica and Kate's smiling faces faded from shop windows. replaced by ads for Cabbage Patch Kids and notices for the town's bicentennial celebration. The disappearance became a dark chapter in Albany's history, a cautionary tale parents told their children about the dangers of wandering off alone. Mary Briggs never recovered from the loss of her daughters. She quit her job at Woolworth's and rarely left the house on Guava Street. Neighbours sometimes saw her sitting on the front porch, staring blankly at the street, as if waiting for her girls to pedal home. Ryan Briggs buried himself in work at the local paper mill, taking double shifts and volunteering for overtime. At night, he drowned his grief in whiskey at Brady's Tavern, stumbling home long after Mary had fallen into a sleepless, tearful slumber. The sisters were gone, and the town moved on, but the unanswered question lingered like shadows on the edge of the Briggs' lives. And as Albany carried on, the memory of that July afternoon at Lake Tivoli refused to fade, leaving the past and its dark mysteries just out of reach. The truth doesn't wait, and neither do the dangers out there. Every story, every case, every lesson we share could be the difference between safety and regret. Can you afford not to know? Hit that subscribe button before it's too late. On the first anniversary of the disappearance, Mary Briggs organized a candlelight vigil at Lake Tivoli. Nearly the entire town attended, holding white candles that flickered in the summer breeze as a local minister led prayers for the missing sisters. The following year, attendance had dropped noticeably. By the 5th anniversary, only Mary, Ryan, and a few of the girls' closest friends stood quietly by the shore, remembering. Every year on the girls' birthdays, Mary baked a cake and set the table for 5. Herself, Ryan, Jessica, Kate, and Chief Daniel Harper, who faithfully came to reassure the Briggs that the case remained active. He would bring the case file, now stored in a cardboard box in the basement of the police station, and review the evidence once more, though nothing new had surfaced. Through the Reagan years and into the Clinton administration, the Briggs case gathered dust. The officers who had worked the original investigation retired or moved away. Chief Harper himself passed in 1993, taking his personal knowledge of the case with him. The new chief, a young man far from Washington with no connection to the 1976 events, archived the Briggs files alongside decades-old records of prohibition raids and town council minutes. Mary Briggs died in 2004, never learning the fate of her daughters. Ryan Briggs, diagnosed with cancer, passed 6 months later. They were buried side by side in Albany Cemetery, beneath a headstone that read, "Beloved parents of Jessica and Kate." 2 smaller markers flanked their grave, memorials for daughters whose bodies were never found. The family home on Guava Street was sold to a young couple from New York, who renovated it completely, unaware of its tragic history, until neighbors shared the story of the Briggs sisters. In the attic, the new owners discovered a box of the girls' belongings, yearbooks, diaries, and photographs that Mary had carefully preserved. Though decades had passed, the mystery of Jessica and Kate Briggs lingered, whispering from the shadows of Albany, and as the attic's dusty keepsakes revealed a glimpse of the past, the unanswered questions of that July day at Lake Tivoli refused to fade, waiting for someone to uncover the final truth. Every day you wait to protect your family is another day danger could strike. Don't be the parent who says, "I wish I knew." Check the pinned comment and download the Family Survival Guide now before it's too late. Not knowing what else to do with these relics of sorrow, the Briggs family's remaining belongings were donated to the Albany Historical Society, where they were catalogued and carefully stored. Meanwhile, the world continued to move forward, while the memory of Jessica and Kate's disappearance remained frozen in time. The Berlin Wall fell. The internet revolutionized communication. Cell phones replaced payphones. DNA testing transformed forensic investigation. Cold cases across the country were being solved using technologies that would have seemed like science fiction in 1978. Then, in the spring of 2017, nearly 37 years after Jessica and Kate vanished, a discovery at Lake Tivoli would reignite the Briggs case and set off a chain of events that finally brought the truth closer to light. It began with a historic drought, the worst in New York's recorded history, as water levels at Lake Tivoli fell to unprecedented lows. Stretches of the lakebed that had been submerged for decades emerged. A team of environmental science students from Albany Community College was conducting a study on the drought's effects when one of them made a shocking discovery near the former North Shore, now nearly 30 yards from the current waterline. At first, she assumed it was sun-bleached driftwood poking from the cracked mud, but as she knelt for a closer look, horror set in. What lay before her were human remains, partially embedded in the sediment. The Albany Police Department, now equipped with modern forensic resources, secured the site immediately. The county medical examiner and a forensic anthropologist from the University of Albany carefully excavated the area, ultimately recovering not one but 2 sets of skeletal remains. The cold, oxygen-poor lake bed had preserved the bones almost perfectly, shielding them from decomposition and scavengers that would have scattered them years ago. After nearly 4 decades, Jessica and Kate Briggs' bodies had finally been found. But the questions of how and why they died were still unanswered, and as investigators began piecing together the evidence, the long-buried secrets of Lake Tivoli threatened to reveal a truth more chilling than the town had ever imagined. Initial examination revealed the remains belonged to 2 young females, one around 19 years old, the other slightly younger. Both had sustained blunt force trauma to the skull. The forensic anthropologist estimated they had been submerged for decades. Heavy stones had once been tied to the bodies with what appeared to be electrical cord. Over time, the cord deteriorated, allowing the remains to shift with the lake's currents. Detective Sarah Wiley, who had joined the Brookhaven Police Department just 3 years prior, was assigned to the case. As she reviewed the medical examiner's report, a faint sense of recognition began to emerge. Born and raised in Albany, Wiley had no personal connection to the Briggs disappearance. Yet, she remembered a display at the Albany Historical Society referencing the town's most infamous unsolved mystery. Wiley drove to the Historical Society, housed in a restored Victorian mansion on Elm Street. The curator, Arnold Jenks, was a lifelong resident of Albany. When Wiley inquired about the Briggs sisters, Jenks led her to a glass case in a back room. There, photographs of Jessica and Kate Briggs smiled up from beneath a thick layer of dust. "I was in high school when they vanished," Jenkins said. "People thought they'd been kidnapped, maybe taken out of state. No one imagined they could have been in the lake all this time." Wiley obtained dental records preserved from the original investigation. The medical examiner confirmed her suspicion. The remains recovered from Lake Tivoli were indeed Jessica and Kate Briggs. But identification was only the beginning. Now Wiley faced the immense challenge of investigating a murder that had occurred before she was even born. The original detectives had long since retired or passed away, and the memories of potential witnesses were faded or unreliable. With no first-hand accounts and decades-old evidence, solving the Briggs case seemed nearly impossible. Yet, as Wiley began piecing together old reports, maps, and forensic notes, she sensed a thread that might finally unravel the decades-long mystery, if she could survive the truths it threatened to reveal. Can you afford to scroll past while your loved ones remain unprepared? This isn't just another e-book. It could save lives. Get it in the pinned comment. Decades-old evidence had deteriorated or gone missing, yet Wiley felt a deep responsibility to the Briggs sisters and to Albany, a town that had never truly recovered from their disappearance. She began by digitizing the entire case file, police reports, witness statements, photographs and notes from the original investigation. Wiley constructed a digital timeline of the girls' last known movements and built a database of everyone mentioned in the files. She reached out to the FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit for help in developing a profile of the perpetrator, based on the limited evidence still available. One of her first interviews was with Janie White, now Janie Berner, Jessica Briggs' best friend in high school. In her 60s, with grown children and grandchildren, Janie still recalled that summer of 1978 vividly. "I've carried the guilt all these years," Janie confessed to Wiley in her living room. "Surrounded by family photos and potted plants. I knew about the man Jessica was seeing, but I promised not to tell. If I'd said something sooner, maybe," Wiley leaned forward. "What man, Mrs. Berner?" Janie nervously twisted her wedding ring. "She wouldn't give me a name. Said it was complicated, that I wouldn't understand. But she told me he was older, and they had to keep it secret because people wouldn't approve. I always thought he might have been a teacher or someone like that. This lined up with what Janie had told the original investigators decades ago. Yet Wiley pressed for more. Did Jessica ever say where they met, or how long they'd been seeing each other? Janie hesitated, glancing toward a faded photograph on the wall before whispering something that made Wiley's blood run cold. The revelation hinted at a connection no one had ever suspected, and Wiley knew that uncovering it could finally expose the truth, but also put her squarely in danger. Some people ignore warning signs until it's too late. Don't let your loved ones be the next cautionary tale. Download the Family Survival Guide today. Check the pinned comment. Janie closed her eyes, trying to recall conversations from nearly 40 years ago. She mentioned he sometimes gave her rides home, and I remember she started wearing this necklace, a small silver heart. She said it was a gift from him. Wiley jotted down the detail, noting that the necklace had never appeared in the original investigation reports. She then asked about Kate. Kate adored Jessica, Janie said softly. She shadowed her everywhere, wanted to be just like her. If Jessica had a secret boyfriend, Kate would have noticed. Armed with this new insight, Wiley turned her attention back to the evidence recovered from the lake. Among the items were several pieces of jewelry, a charm bracelet, Jessica's class ring, and a tarnished silver heart necklace, still intact despite decades underwater. Subscribe today, because life doesn't come with a second chance, and neither do the lessons in these stories. Every delay, every shrug, every "I'll do it later" could cost you more than you realize. Join now, and at least you'll know. The forensic team had also recovered fragments of clothing and the electrical cord used to weigh down the stones. Modern DNA testing could now reveal information that would have been impossible to detect in 1976. Wiley sent the items to the state crime lab, requesting a full DNA analysis and testing for any chemical residues that might have survived the decades. While awaiting the results, she continued interviewing friends and acquaintances of the Briggs sisters. Most added little beyond what was already known, but one name appeared repeatedly: James Harder, a senior when Jessica was a junior. Several people recalled that he had asked Jessica to prom, which she had politely declined. Harder had joined the Navy after graduation and, according to local sources, never returned to Albany. Wiley tracked him to a suburb of New York, where he worked as an electrical engineer. When Wiley finally made contact, Harder's reaction to her inquiry was far colder and more guarded than she had anticipated. Something in his voice hinted that he knew more than anyone had suspected, and that the final answers about the Briggs sisters might be closer than anyone dared imagine. Now, in his late 52nds, Harder seemed genuinely shocked to hear that the Briggs sisters' remains had been found. He admitted he had once been interested in Jessica, but insisted she had told him she was seeing someone else. When Wiley pressed him for details, Harder recalled Jessica mentioning that she met her boyfriend at the place where her father worked. Ryan Briggs had been employed at the Albany paper mill, which had closed in 1996 and was demolished for a shopping centre. Wiley obtained employment records from the archives, searching for any man who might have had contact with Jessica. Meanwhile, DNA results arrived from the state lab. The cord used to bind the stones to the sisters' bodies contained traces of DNA, preserved by the lake water. Though incomplete, it could be compared to suspects. Chemical tests on the girls' clothing revealed residues from the pulping process, a sign they had been in contact with something, or someone, from the mill shortly before their deaths. Wiley began to piece together a theory. Jessica had been seeing someone connected to the mill, who then lured both sisters to a secluded spot, killed them, and left their bodies in the lake. But who was this man, and was he still alive after all these years? The breakthrough came from the box of Jessica's belongings at the Historical Society. Among them was a diary spanning January to July 1976. The final entry, written July 21st, the day before the sisters vanished, mentioned R and the secrecy of their relationship, hinting at a story of excitement, fear, and guilt that had remained hidden for decades. Wiley turned the page slowly, realizing the diary might hold the key to the identity of R and the truth about what had really happened to Jessica and Kate Briggs. The next step would bring her closer to answers, but also into the shadow of danger that had lingered for nearly 40 years. In one diary entry, Jessica wrote, "R says we can go away together, just the three of us. He says he can find work anywhere with his skills, and no one would ever have to know." But what about Mom? The entry from July 21st was even more revealing. DR says everything is arranged tomorrow at the lake. A new start for all of us. Kate's excited but scared too. I told her it will be an adventure. R says once we're gone, we can be a real family. No more hiding. Wiley felt a shiver run down her spine as she processed the words. She cross-referenced the diary with the old employment records from the paper mill. Ryan Briggs had worked in the pulping department. His personnel file described him as skilled but temperamental, noting several incidents of inappropriate behavior toward female employees. Digging further into the original case files, Wiley uncovered something long overlooked, or perhaps deliberately ignored. Ryan had reported finding the girls' bicycles and belongings at the lake, but no one had questioned how he knew exactly where to look among the many popular swimming spots around Lake Tivoli. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was more horrifying than anyone could have imagined. Wiley began to believe that Ryan Briggs had been involved in an inappropriate relationship with his own daughter Jessica. When she planned to leave for college, he had convinced her and Anna to meet him at the lake, possibly under the pretense of a new life together. Instead, he murdered them both and weighted their bodies down in the water. But theory and circumstantial evidence alone would not be enough. Ryan Briggs had been dead for years, yet if Wiley could prove he was the killer, she could finally close the case and bring a measure of peace to a community haunted by the mystery for nearly 40 years. As she flipped to the next diary page, Wiley noticed a hidden note tucked between the worn sheets, a message that suggested someone else may have known more about that fateful day than anyone had ever realized. The case, it seemed, might not be fully closed after all. Wiley requested an exhumation order for Ryan Briggs' remains. If DNA recovered from his body matched the partial profile found on the electrical cord, it would provide the confirmation she needed. The district attorney was hesitant at first, reluctant to disturb a grave based solely on theory, but after Wiley presented the diary entries, the paper mill records, and the mounting circumstantial evidence, the request was granted. While waiting for the exhumation, Wiley delved deeper into Ryan Briggs' past. She discovered that in 1975, a year before Jessica and Kate disappeared, he had been questioned regarding a 17-year-old female employee at the paper mill. The girl alleged he had made inappropriate advances, though no charges were filed after Briggs claimed it had been a misunderstanding. Soon afterward, the girl and her family moved away. Wiley tracked her down in Washington. During a phone interview, the woman confirmed Briggs' behavior. He said he had special relationships with his daughters, she recalled. They claimed they understood him in ways other women couldn't. It was unsettling, but back then, people didn't talk about that sort of thing. This testimony reinforced Wiley's growing theory. When Ryan's remains were exhumed, DNA testing verified her suspicions. The genetic material found on the electrical cord matched his profile. Further forensic analysis of Ryan's preserved tools revealed that the cut patterns on the cord aligned precisely with a pair of wire cutters he had owned. As Wiley examined the final lab reports, a single note slipped out of the case folder, a scribbled warning in someone else's handwriting decades old. It hinted that Ryan may not have acted entirely alone, suggesting the possibility of another dark secret waiting to be uncovered. Comment: I stand with justice, and I despise evil. Hesitation isn't harmless. It leaves you blind to threats that others see clearly. Every unlearned warning, every ignored clue stacks up against you. Stay in the dark or take the first step toward being prepared. Click subscribe today. On a cold November morning in 2015, Detective Wiley stood before a press conference at Albany Town Hall. Cameras flashed as she delivered the long-awaited announcement. The Briggs case was officially closed. Ryan Briggs, father of Jessica and Kate, had murdered his own daughters and concealed their bodies in Lake Tivoli. Evidence indicates that Ryan Briggs sexually abused at least one of his daughters, Wiley told the stunned audience. When Jessica planned to leave for college, potentially breaking free from his control and exposing him, he killed both girls to silence them. He then participated in the search efforts, hiding in plain sight. The revelation sent shockwaves through Albany. Friends and neighbors struggled to reconcile their memories with the horrifying truth. Some recalled Ryan's controlling behavior and Mary's subdued demeanor as warning signs they had overlooked. Others remembered how Ryan insisted on driving the girls to events, rarely allowing them independence. For those who had lived in Albany since 1976, closure brought conflicting emotions: relief that the mystery was solved, but profound grief over the decades of secrecy. Many wondered how such a dark truth could have existed in their close-knit community, unnoticed. A memorial service was held on the shore of Lake Tivoli. Hundreds attended, including volunteers from the original search nearly 40 years earlier. Janie laid flowers on the water, finally able to say goodbye to her childhood friends. Arnold Jenks, from the Historical Society, curated a permanent exhibit about the case, not to sensationalize the tragedy, but to ensure the community remembered Jessica and Kate, and perhaps remained vigilant in protecting vulnerable children in the future. The sisters' remains were reinterred in Albany's cemetery, not beside their parents, but in a new location. A headstone read simply, "Ibra, Jessica and Kate Briggs, beloved sisters, finally at peace." Yet as Wiley reviewed the final case files one last time, a single envelope fell from the folder, unmarked, yellowed with age. Inside was a letter hinting that Ryan may not have acted entirely alone. Someone else might have known. Someone who had never been questioned. Every story like the Briggs sisters could have been avoided with knowledge. Don't let your family be next. Grab the survival ebook in the pinned comment and learn what others learned too late. In the years following the resolution of the Briggs case, Detective Wiley became an advocate for cold case investigations and better resources for victims of family abuse. She often cited Briggs' case in her presentations to law enforcement agencies across the country, emphasizing how advances in forensic science could bring justice even decades after a crime. The tragedy of the Briggs sisters also led to positive changes in Albany itself. The town established a crisis center for victims of domestic violence and sexual abuse, named Jessica's Place, in memory of Jessica Briggs. Schools implemented more comprehensive education programs about recognizing and reporting abuse, and the police department created a dedicated cold case unit to ensure that no unsolved crime would ever again be forgotten. For Detective Wiley, the Briggs case was both a professional triumph and a profound lesson in the persistence of truth. Justice delayed is not always justice denied, she often said. Sometimes it's just waiting for the right moment, the right technology, or the right person to bring it into the light. The lake that had held the secret of the Briggs sisters for nearly 4 decades now serves as a place of reflection and remembrance. A small plaque at the shoreline tells their story, not as victims of an unsolved mystery, but as young women whose lives were cut tragically short, and whose truth, though long submerged, eventually rose to the surface. In solving the Briggs case, Wiley and her team had accomplished something remarkable. They had given voice to victims who had been silenced for nearly 40 years. They had proven that time could not erase the evidence of truth, that secrets buried in lake mud and human hearts would eventually be revealed. As the waters of Lake Tivoli gradually returned to their normal levels, covering once again the spot where Jessica and Kate had rested for so long, the town of Albany began its own healing process. The horrible truth about Ryan Briggs and his daughters had been exposed to the light of day. And in that harsh illumination, the community found a way forward, wiser, more vigilant, and dedicated to ensuring that such silent suffering would never again go unnoticed or unaddressed. The story of the Briggs sisters remains a painful chapter in Albany's history, but also a powerful reminder that justice, though sometimes delayed by decades, can still be served. The truth, like the bodies in Lake Tivoli, may be submerged for years, but eventually it will rise to the surface. And when it does, it brings with it the possibility of healing, of change, and of ensuring that those who were once forgotten are finally remembered. In the end, it was not sophisticated technology alone that solved the case of Jessica and Kate Briggs. It was the combination of modern forensic methods with the preserved evidence from 1976. The diary entries in a teenage girl's handwriting, the weathered photographs, the employment records yellowed with age, and the memories of those who had known them. Together, these fragments from the past combined with tools of the present to reveal a truth that had been hiding in plain sight for nearly 40 years. And so, the case of the Briggs sisters was closed. But their legacy lives on, in the crisis center that bears Jessica's name, in the cold case unit at the Albany Police Department, in the annual scholarship awarded to a graduating senior pursuing a degree in criminal justice or social work, and in the hearts of a community that finally knows the truth about what happened on that hot July day in 1976. Justice, though long delayed, had finally been served. The truth, though painful, had finally been told. And Jessica and Kate Briggs, though they never lived to see it adulthood, had finally found peace. Subscribe now, because every second you wait, someone else might already know what you don't. Ignoring this could mean missing the very warning that could save you or someone you love. Don't be the one looking back, wishing you acted sooner.